Okay, ready to dive into another one.
Let's do it.
All right, so today we're going deep into, well, a real head scratcher of an aviation mystery. We're talking about the L-8, the U.S. Navy blimp that picked up that super spooky nickname, the Ghost Blimp.
Yeah, the Ghost Blimp. I mean, it's a story that really sticks with you, and to get why it's so strange, you kind of have to put yourself back there. August 16th, 1942. Pearl Harbor was still so fresh in everyone's minds, and the whole West Coast was basically bracing for the next attack.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very tense time, wasn't it? I mean, you had the bombing of the Elwood oil field, the shelling of Fort Stevens, and even that whole weird thing with the Battle of Los
Oh,
Angeles.
right, right. The Battle of Los Angeles, which of course everyone thinks was just a weather balloon that got blown way out of proportion. But at the time, people were freaking out.
Yeah, totally. So we've got this backdrop of like wartime paranoia. And then into this atmosphere, you have this seemingly routine anti-submarine patrol that takes this completely bonkers turn.
Yeah, it's wild. And that's what we're going to try and do in this deep dive. Try to break down what we actually know about what happened to the L-8. Like, what are the facts? Where does the mystery start? And of course, the big question, what on earth happened to the crew?
Right, exactly. And to do that, we're going to go through everything, from the moment that blimp took off to the investigations that came after. We'll look at the blimp itself, what it was designed for, and like you said, that whole crazy wartime context on the Pacific coast.
It all plays a part, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so first things first. What can you tell us about the aircraft itself? These L-class blimps, were they those huge, rigid airships that you kind of picture when you think blimp?
Not quite. The L class, and that includes our ghost blimp, the L-8, they were what we call non-rigid airships. Basically, imagine those Goodyear blimps you see at sporting events and stuff. Well, that's kind of where these came from.
So like advertising blimps. Seriously.
Yeah, seriously. The Navy needed more eyes in the sky when the war started, and they borrowed them from Goodyear. Turned them into these L-class patrol blimps.
That's wild. So they just repurposed these advertising blimps for like wartime patrol duty.
Pretty much. They were considered a, cost-effective way to keep an eye on the coast, especially for things like submarine activity. Not ideal for long-range stuff, but good for those close-to-shore patrols.
Wow. Okay, so we've got a repurposed blimp, and we're talking specifically about the L-8 here.
Hmm.
Didn't they get a new name later on?
It did. It was eventually renamed America. But yeah, it's always going to be known as the Ghost Blimp. And get this, the L-8. Even before that fateful flight, it had already been involved in some pretty interesting stuff.
No way. Like what?
Well, remember the Doolittle raid?
Of course, who doesn't?
Well, the L-8 actually played a small but super important role in that whole lead-up. It actually delivered some crucial parts to the USS Hornet. That was the aircraft carrier that launched the B-25 bombers for the raid, after it had already left California.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah.
So it was already a bit of a seasoned veteran, this blimp.
You could say that. And the thing is, that flight on August 16th, it wasn't some special mission or anything. It was just its 1093rd flight.
1,093 flights without incident, and then this. Okay, so we know a bit about the blimp, but what about the guys flying it? Who was on board that morning?
Well, we had Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody. He was 27 years old, a seasoned pilot. And with him, Ensign Charles Adams, 35. And for Adams, it was his first flight as a commissioned officer. Can you imagine that? First official flight, and this is what happens.
Oh, man, what a way to start a career, huh? And what exactly were they supposed to be doing that day?
They were on a pretty standard coastal anti-submarine patrol. Their route was supposed to take them out over the Farallon Islands, then up north towards Point Reyes, then down to Montera, and then back towards the Golden Gate Bridge. Pretty typical for that kind of patrol.
Okay, and what kind of firepower did this blimp pack? Was it like heavily armed or what?
Well, for what it was, it had the basics. 2 depth charges in case they found a submarine, and a .30 caliber machine gun. Probably more for signaling or self-defense if they really needed it. And the weather that morning was clear, calm, so nothing out of the ordinary there.
Okay, routine mission, good weather, experienced pilot. So when was the last anyone heard from them?
Last confirmed communication was at 7:38 a.m. Cody radioed back to base at Treasure Island. Said they'd spotted an oil slick about 4 miles off the coast of the Farallon Islands.
An oil slick, huh? That'd be cause for concern, right? Could mean a sub was in the area.
Exactly. You see an oil slick on a patrol like that, you gotta check it out. And it wasn't just them either. A Liberty ship and a fishing boat, they were both nearby, and they saw the L-8 too. Said it went down real low, like almost touching the water, circling the slick.
Wow. So they were definitely on the case. That was the last anyone saw them.
Last anyone saw them with the crew on board, yeah. Then, at 8:50 a.m., all contact is lost. Just gone.
And no distress calls? Nothing.
Nope. Just silence. And that's what's so freaky, right? No mayday, no indication that anything was wrong.
It's like they just vanished into thin air. But then, a little while later, the blimp reappears.
You got it. Around 9 a.m., barely an hour after they go radio silent, people see the L-8 again. But it's acting weird. It dumps its ballast, shoots way up in the air, and starts heading east. Not towards Point Reyes like it was supposed to.
Hold on. It's flying by itself.
Seems that way. Changing altitude, changing direction, all without a soul on board.
Okay, this is where it gets super creepy. So the unmanned blimp is heading east. Then what?
Well, a couple of hours pass, and then around 11:15 a.m., the L-8 shows up again. This time it's drifting in real low off Ocean Beach near Fort Funston.
So it's back overland.
Yeah, and get this, it actually touches down on the beach for a bit. Two guys who are fishing there, they see it coming in and they try to grab it, hold it down.
What, like it's a runaway kite or something?
I know, right? But they get close enough to look inside the gondola, and guess what? It's completely empty.
Empty. No Cody, no Adams.
No one. They can't hold on to it, obviously, so they have to let go. The L-8 lifts back up, lighter now without those guys holding on, but then it drifts inland and bumps into a cliff, bends a propeller, knocks loose one of the depth charges.
Oh, man. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah, and losing that depth charge would have made it even lighter, so it goes up even higher. Those blimps, they were super sensitive to weight changes.
Right. And I'm guessing the damage didn't stop there, did it?
Nope. That bump probably messed up an automatic valve inside. So now it's slowly leaking helium. You can imagine what that did. It starts to deflate. The gondola weighs it down. It gets this like saggy V shape. And it just keeps drifting over the Olympic Club golf course, across Mission Street, right over people's houses in the Crocker Amazon neighborhood. Bumping into things, scraping roofs.
Like a giant deflating balloon with a mind of its own. Where does this whole joyride finally end?
It finally crashes, just comes down the street right in front of a house at 419 Bellevue Avenue in Daly City.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Just lands there.
Pretty much. I mean, it was a bit banged up, but considering everything, the damage wasn't that bad.
So the unmanned blimp finally comes down in this quiet neighborhood. What happens next? I mean, people must have been losing their minds.
Oh, yeah. Chaos. Police, military, everyone's rushing to this scene. And here's the thing. The gondola doors, they were wide open.
Open doors. But
right.
No crew.
Nope. Gone. Vanished. And the crash itself, it was so gentle that investigators figured if they'd been inside, they probably could have walked away from it.
That's unsettling, to say the least.
Yes.
So massive search, right? They had to have looked everywhere for those guys.
Oh, yeah, they did. Air, land, sea, the whole 9 yards. They scoured the coastline, the ocean, nothing. 2 days later, they call it off. No Cody, no Adams, no trace.
And what about the blimp? Did they find anything on board that might explain what happened?
That's the thing. The parachutes, all 3 of them, still packed up nice and neat. Life raft, right where it should be. Doesn't look like they tried to bail out.
So they didn't jump, but they just disappeared.
And get this, the radio was on, the engines were on, no distress signals. It's like whatever happened, happened fast. No time to react.
No time to react. That's terrifying. So what did the official investigation say? Did they ever figure out what caused this whole thing?
Well, the Navy, they did their whole investigation, big board of inquiry. They ruled out a bunch of stuff right off the bat. No enemy fire, no explosions, no sign it crashed into the ocean. No evidence that Cody or Adams did anything wrong either. But they couldn't say what did happen. Officially, it's still unsolved. Unsolved and incredibly creepy. And the next year, both guys were declared dead. Legally, at least.
So officially, a big, fat question mark.
Mm-hmm.
But there had to be theories, right? What did people think could have happened?
Oh, tons of theories. The Navy, they had their own idea, even if it was a bit of a stretch. They figured maybe one of the guys went to drop a smoke marker at the oil slick, to mark it for later.
Okay, but wouldn't they have done that from inside?
Well, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But the theory goes that maybe the guy opened the hatch, something happened, and he fell out.
Fell out. From a blimp.
That's what they were thinking. And then the other guy, he sees his buddy hanging there, tries to pull him back in, and he falls out too. Now the blimp's a lot lighter, so it shoots up, and well, you know the rest.
I don't know. It just seems, I mean, wouldn't the first guy have yelled, tried to get back in? Wouldn't the other guy have stayed inside, called for help?
Exactly. It doesn't quite add up, does it? Lots of people had problems with that theory.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
So what other explanations were people throwing around?
Well, remember, this was 1942, wartime, everyone's on edge. So some folks thought maybe it was the Japanese, maybe a submarine snuck up while they were checking out the oil slick, captured them or something.
Captured by a submarine.
Ah.
That's a bit more dramatic, isn't it?
It is, but there's no evidence of any Japanese subs in the area at the time. And then, of course, you had the more out there ideas.
Okay, like what?
Well, some people whispered about defection. Maybe Cody and Adams decided to switch sides, fly the blimp over to the Japanese.
Seriously. With no warning. No reason. Seems like a huge leap, don't you think?
Totally. It doesn't really fit what we know about them. And then as the years went by and the mystery, just stayed a mystery, well, the theories got even wilder.
Well, I bet. Did aliens get involved?
Of course they did. You can't have a good mystery without someone blaming it on aliens.
I mean, I guess not. So, the Ghost Blimp became a UFO case, too.
Pretty much. It just goes to show how much this story captured people's imaginations. They needed some kind of explanation, even if it involved little green men.
It's definitely a story that sticks with you. Okay, so, we know the crew is gone, the blimp is a wreck, but it didn't end there, did it? You said earlier that it actually flew again.
Yeah, crazy, right? They fixed the L-8 up pretty quickly, and it went right back to work for the Navy.
Wow, back to patrolling the coast like nothing happened.
Basically. Then, after the war, they sold the gondola part back to Goodyear. And in 1969, get this, they renamed it America, registered it as N10A, and it became one of those Goodyear blimps you see at football games and stuff. Flew around for over a decade.
The Ghost Blimp turned advertising icon. That's kind of poetic in a way. So, where is it now? Sitting in some Goodyear warehouse collecting dust.
Even better, they repainted it with its original L-8 markings and sent it off to the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. You can actually go see it there.
Wow, that's amazing. A real piece of history. Oh, before I forget, you mentioned earlier that there was some conflicting information about what the blimp was called before it became the L-8.
Yeah, some sources say it was called Ranger, others say Rainbow. Just one of those little historical quirks. Shows you how, even with something as big as a blimp, the details can get a bit fuzzy over time.
It's true. Okay, so let's recap here for everyone. We have the L-8, a.k.a. the Ghost Blimp. Out on patrol, vanishes without a trace, reappears flying itself, does a little tour of San Francisco, then gently crashes. No crew, no explanation. It's like something out of a Twilight Zone episode.
It really is. A perfectly functional aircraft, good weather, experienced crew, they just disappear. No distress calls, no signs of a struggle, their parachutes and life raft untouched. And the blimp itself, well, it basically lands itself.
And that's the real kicker, isn't it? If it had crashed, exploded, something like that, well, maybe then we could understand. But this just defies logic.
It really does. And it's not just us saying that. The official investigation, they couldn't explain it either.
So we're left with this giant question mark hanging over the whole thing. And I think it's important to remember, like we said earlier, the context of all this. 1942, the world was at war. People were terrified, especially on the West Coast.
You're right. That atmosphere of fear, it definitely played a role. Maybe it made people jump to conclusions, made them see enemy threats where there were none.
Maybe. Or maybe it made them discount possibilities that were just too strange to accept. I mean, imagine trying to explain alien abduction in 1942.
Yeah, good point. People were looking for answers, but maybe they weren't ready for certain kinds of answers.
And that's what makes this story so fascinating, so enduring, don't you think? It's a reminder that even with all the evidence, all the investigations, sometimes the truth just stays hidden.
Absolutely. The mystery of the Ghost Blimp. It's not just about what happened to those two men. It's about the limits of our understanding.
And I think that's what we want you to think about as you listen to this. What piece of this puzzle stands out to you? What feels the most significant or the most unexplained? And if you could go back, if you could investigate further, where would you start? What would you look for? Because the mystery of the Ghost Blimp, it's still out there, waiting for someone to solve it. Or maybe, just maybe, some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved.
Maybe that's the most unsettling answer of all.
Maybe it is. Thanks for diving into this with me. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep wondering.